We begin by acknowledging that the land on which we produce this podcast is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. We acknowledge the enduring presence of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people on this land, and we believe it is important to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect.
I'm Kimberly Mackenzie.
And I'm Paul Nazareth. Welcome to The Intersection.
Paul, great to see you again.
You too, Kimberly.
This is fun. This is a lot of fun. I wonder if I start every podcast that way, do I?
Maybe. I think you're often thinking of the people who comment, and we can often hear them in our mind saying, all right, we're on the right track. Let's keep going.
So I think there has been some positive feedback. And if there's some challenging feedback, I'd love it, because we're both reading Adam Grant's book right now. And so if there's something we could do better to serve the community, I want to know. So I encourage people to comment on all of the social spaces that we're in. So it's just us today. And I have a question for you that people have been asking me. And I was chatting with a client about just last week, actually. A lot of people right now are dying, either of fentanyl or, overdoses are in epidemic proportions in Canada. And of course, we have our pandemic. So I thought we could explore how charities might, or should they, continue to talk about legacies with their donors.
Welcome to the darkness. That's quite a way to start. People are dying.
Was that bad? Like, we could re-record it. But how many people have said, should I be talking about legacies right now?
Listen, you know, it's a perfect place to start, because legacy always starts with myth, and then we go to reality.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to talk about it because they're scared of death right now. But the reality is that's not the reason to have a legacy program and a charity. The fact is that legacy is the only sustainable program at a charity, because more importantly, more people will die naturally than of all these unnatural causes. Yeah. And we got to remember that Canada in 2021 is officially older than it is younger, right? So we've got all these demographics working against us on the legacy side that we have to actually make sure, one, because it's just an actual sustainable revenue stream. People are always going to go no matter what. But two, it is the end of that donor journey. And that is a responsibility in a lot of cases we have to donors.
Well, I know I was provocative, because you and I are very much on the same
because
page.
Nobody says it that way. Sometimes I wish they would.
Well, it's what they're thinking. It's what everybody's thinking.
But I hope that people greet me whenever I travel the country after this with, people are dying, Paul.
Yeah. We got to hurry up. Our most loyal donor is in the hospital. We've never talked to him about a bequest. Guess what? If you're at that stage, it's too late.
Too late. Dang.
Too late. Don't go in there and talk about that now. Oh. Yeah. So another interesting stat, and you may know it because you're more in this space than I am, but I heard something about people, the number of wills that are being written right now has gone up like 400% or something.
You know, we just got some interesting data from a colleague of our Canadian Legal Wills, and they were talking about how April 2020, they had more wills done online than in the past 20 years of their business. And we heard from Canadian Bar Association, from estate planning councils all across the country. There's been two really big bumps in the will planning. That first big bump, April 2020, when people were grappling with, and, you know, thanks to our Fraser Greens and our Brandon McEachrons and a bunch of people who coined this term of reacting to that feeling of death, to what we're soon seeing is the bump as we come out of this, reflecting on what we went through and what our values are. And that's going to be where the real business is for charities.
Absolutely. So the data is telling us very clearly, donors want to talk about their end of life plans right now.
They're going to be coming at us. And the question is, will we be ready?
Yeah, exactly. And I know I started it off with the doom and gloom of death. But we spoke about that wonderful charity out in Winnipeg that has the Book of Life, and that death is a book of life. Oh, I should read that poem. What was it? The Canadian Jewish Foundation.
Yes, indeed. yeah, some of the best poetry comes from Jewish communities, and
Yeah,
I hope folks.
yeah, it's not their poem, dude, but I did a presentation and I read a poem and I just
Well,
thought
while
about
you look
it.
for that, I'll share what I consider to be poetry, which is that
Okay.
another lawyer in BC who was telling me about having to call a tiny cat shelter whose annual budget was 80,000 or something. And he called them up and he was calling them to tell them that they had inherited $9 million, and that the executive director started hyperventilating. She was afraid she was going to have a heart attack on the call. But again, she said, "Boy, wow, I can't. You're going to enjoy calling the gallery." And the lawyer was like, what are you talking about? And she said, she was on the founding board of the gallery. She gives to it. She chairs everything. He said, "I am the executor of her estate, and I'm the person who wrote her will. You're the only charity in there." He said, and I know too, it's because you're the only charity that asked. She gave me a piece of paper confirming that she wanted you on it. You made that ad. Whereas the gallery never asked, even though she was the chair of the board, founding board chair. We always think it's about donors naturally remembering us. How do they know how to do that? No one's teaching them that. It's really about making sure that we've asked respectfully.
Well, see, okay, I don't think it is an ask. And I know there are folks who will disagree with me. But for many of the small to mid-sized organizations that I work with, it's about peppering the legacy conversation throughout all of the communications.
But
and
that's an ask. A
It's
checkbox is an ask.
it's kind of an ask, but it's not a.
I know it's passive, so it makes people feel
It
comfortable.
is passive.
But I think for a lot of other people, it requires a little bit of courage to put it on there.
Yeah, well, it requires. I mean, let's talk about board approval for that. But create, peppering the conversation about how you want your values extended beyond your lifetime among all of your communications travel channels means that it's a very gentle, when you're ready for this conversation, we're willing to have it with you. We want to have it with you.
That's the best way it's done. For me, that's the ideal, but I don't see a lot of organizations doing it that way. Again, it's how they get that energy. Some people, it's got to be artificial and they're out there fracking and that's their kind of fundraising. And some people believe in solar, wind, and water. I've always said I would rather just put a turbine.
That's another thing. Okay, Okay, I'm sorry. What?
Yeah.
Start over.
Okay, so
You're doing it again.
There are people whose fundraising is mining and churning the wheel and working the funnel, and it all just seems like a big, salt mine with people busting rocks. And then there's people who really design donor journeys to happen organically, both the acquisition and the donor development and the conversations. And for me, that's so much more like solar, wind. Again, I've always said I'd rather put a turbine under Niagara Falls than have to dig something out from the earth. And that's how people think of their donors. They're burning them up like coal, as opposed to saying we have an organic lifelong relationship that has an organic beginning and an end, and will meet you where you are along that S curve.
I don't think it is an end, actually. I think that when we're talking about legacies, our role as charities is to fulfill their hopes and dreams and desires beyond their lifetime. And that is the intimate conversation that we have with donors around their bequest. So I get all goosebumpy about that. I love those conversations because
they are. But my challenge is I also live in the world of finance officers and and the fiscal needs of the organization. And I know how bosses and boards think, and they think that's lovely. That's an emotional concept. Where's the money? And they're always saying, when is the end of that? Of course, they don't even understand. We're not even making a metaphor, because if we do it right, we've also got that next generation of donor, right? So it is also about what they would call the sustainable revenue, or, and the next generation of business. But people don't often believe that the eloquence and the economic can come together.
Okay, I wrote about this long time ago. It's the hard and soft side of planned giving. I have a tendency to lean towards the soft, and of course the director of finance is going to want to lean towards the hard. And finding the sweet spot in between those two, that intersection, is where legacy giving can thrive. So I remember when I was first when I was working on my first legacy program, I I wasn't the right person. Of course, I called in the godfather of love, David Love, to come in. And for anybody, you can look up David. Any picture on the internet is going to show you exactly what that board meeting was like. But uh, he was a dear friend of mine from one of my first fundraising jobs. And so he came into the next one because I knew that me at 40 was not going to convince this board that we needed a budget line to support a legacy program. And I know that that's tragic. That's how overpaid consultants make their money, but which is unfortunate. And David volunteered to do that. I need to be very clear, but he was very happy to come into an environmental organization and stand there with all of his gray hair and his 40 years of fundraising experience, but would have been about 30 then, and make the case for a legacy program at my organization. And he did that extremely well.
Mhm.
So sometimes that's what it takes to
You
convince
bet.
the board.
And that's what I do a lot of now. And that's what a lot of, our peers even do as well, because they've reached that place where they've got enough clout or gray hair, whichever one, to
Mhm.
convince the board. And I really do think that's a tragedy, because this is the kind of thing that if boards are kind of risk managers or thinking themselves as fiduciary, facilitators, then they've got to ask about that revenue. They've got to ask it to say, who out there, what business has one product line? Right? So that's the part between saying how much do we bring in of X, of online, of different types of assets besides just cash, monthly gifts. That's the kind of thing. We're not expecting them to be fundraising strategists, but just make sure that you ask the expert, right? If it's a marketing thing, there's a person who does marketing. If it's a director of finance, there's someone accredited to do that. And if there's someone in fundraising, well, that is an accredited profession,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So we need
Well,
them to recognize that.
now you're going to get me started. But
Yeah.
whew, the wind out there is nuts. I hope you can't hear that. So there's a reason why I think boards like to talk about how much stamps cost for the direct mail program.
Okay.
And I think that that's because where they feel most comfortable having conversations. They think that they understand that.
Which is the same in fundraising, because most fundraising is organ grinder monkey stuff. One
Sure.
action, $1.
Very tactical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I can't imagine anyone who would run their own business like that unless
that's
they have a
true.
lemonade stand.
That's true. And so this has taken us to one of my other favorite topics, which is how can we help our board be as successful as possible? And how can we shift the conversation from fundraising tactics, where many boards like to dwell? First of all, um, I think we as development professionals, nonprofit professionals, have a responsibility to treat our boards the way we treat our donors, in respect that when we enter information into the database about our donors, or we talk about our donors in public, it's best practice to imagine the donor is sitting right beside you and to only document things that you would share with them. And yet, one of the things I wish I could wave a magic wand and change is the way development professionals and executive directors talk about their boards when their boards are not around. And we do them a disservice when we think of them that way, because I think it's helpful for staff to ask themselves, if our board is not giving because they don't believe that they should, then what do I need to do with my board to earn that gift from them? And if our board is spending too much time on fundraising tactics in board meetings without understanding the importance of a philanthropic culture, what do we need to do with our board to help them better understand that? Because as staff, it's our job. I mean, these folks are our most loyal volunteers, and we often forget that because you have so many tension points with the board, right? But they're our most loyal and our most generous volunteers, who are giving their time, their talent, and their treasurer, not one of the three, but all of those three.
Yeah.
And yet we treat them like adversaries. Many times. I'm making general statements. I know there are some organizations who
Yes.
have wonderful
Yeah.
relationships with their boards. I know that. I also know that probably 75% of fundraisers out there cringe when we say the word board of
And
directors.
partly because they have no relationship with them whatsoever. In
Well,
very
that,
large
yes,
organizations, we're talking
right.
about 4 or 5 levels up.
Yes. So, yes, that's also true.
Mm.
So when the board isn't around, it's the responsibility of senior leadership to be respectful of them when they're not around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those conversations at the water cooler.
Yep.
And it's also, I think, important to remember that while there is an accountability piece between the staff and the board, but they are our most loyal donors, and we need to come up with a stewardship program, one-on-one stewardship program for each of them in between board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I've seen this a lot, and frankly, I've seen my own leadership struggle sometimes with that kind of very hands-on, very detailed stewardship kind of plan. But the ones I've seen who have, it's night and day in terms of the relationship with the board to the organization, with the staff. And again, with fundraising, however deep or hands-off it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, we just no one's who's training these people. That's the other challenge
That's
too, right?
no one. Well,
Yeah.
I
No.
mean, there are consultants, many
But
of
it's
my
left up to the charity or
yes,
nonprofit. And
yeah.
that's just wacky.
Well, I think there are organizations, you're better at remembering these things, but I think Board Intelligence does some board development, and
Oh,
Fundraising
yeah.
Leadership just came out with this amazing booklet today. Janice
Yep.
Cunning and David,
Oh,
you know,
and
Dave.
Charity Village has some material as well as board programs like Capacity Canada's board program, Maitre's board program, and of course the one that we see a lot of, the Institute of Corporate Directors. But that one's so high up in the clouds, is it even accessible? Is the question too.
Okay, so
Yeah,
here's the thing.
yeah,
The resources are out there. We have people who are working in charities on the hamster wheel of delivering programs and fundraising and doing more with less and really struggling because they're not well resourced.
mhm,
We know that that's a problem. And then we have our board members, and our board members are often the busiest people in the world, not only volunteering for us, but running their businesses, taking care of their families, and serving on other boards.
yep.
So the resources are there, the information is there, but it's not being translated into the culture of the organization.
By either the organization itself, or in a lot of cases, people leave it up to the actual board members to do their own education,
Right. Yeah,
which is
I sit on a board of
yeah.
directors. We're meeting in 2.5 hours. I haven't done my homework for that meeting yet. It's like,
But you're gonna though, right?
but I will. I
That's right.
actually have time scheduled for an hour before the board meeting to do
Right.
the work that I need to do to show up and be able to contribute. But I
That's
mean,
key.
that's the challenge. So
Yep.
building that accountability structure into the board meetings, creating agendas that aren't just a bunch of tick boxes as you move through real quickly, but making time for conversations so that you can train along the way, I think is helpful.
Mhm.
And rewarding good behavior. It sounds very patronizing. I don't mean that, but we do have a tendency with boards to say, well, you should be doing this and you should be doing this and you should be doing this. But what if we change the conversation and we go into the meeting and we say, Paul, you came in and you wrote some thank you letters and you made a couple of thank you calls. And I just wanted to tell you in front of everybody how much that meant to us. And the other piece I think that we miss in our board meetings is inspiring them. We talk so much about the business of running the organization. We rarely ever inspire them with wonderful stories of donors and beneficiaries and the organizations that do that, that provide a boost and help board members leave feeling inspired with and weepy are the charities that are going to have boards that aren't going to want to talk about whether or not the direct mail budget is sufficient, right?
Yep.
Yeah. On a bit of a rant today, but
It's important because I'm, part the funny thing is, in the very tactical world of plan giving that I live in, then I go to a board who's not inspired, who's not informed, who's not confident even in their own abilities. And what are the, they're playing tennis without seeing the lines. That's bad governance, but that's how most organizations really help them leave their board to operate in. And I'm asking them a tactical question. So then I'm surprised while their answer is no, just do what I understand and is safe.
Yeah.
And that's the danger. A lot of boards are there to play it safe, to just not be the board that screwed the whole thing up. And that's not necessarily an environment, culture of philanthropy or a place to innovate.
Well, and it's also very risk averse.
Mm.
So that made me think of that saying. Um, I'm not even pretending not to remember it. I don't have it written down anywhere or anything. You don't plant a tree for today, you plant the tree for all the people who follow. That tree planting quote, it's like,
The other one I'm thinking of is people who always say to me the best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The
that
second
one,
best day is yesterday.
that one. Okay,
Yeah.
that one. Well,
Yeah.
it's the same with a planned giving program, right?
Yep.
So if we have conversations with our board about where we want the organization to be 10, 15, 20 years from now, and we can help them see the big vision for the impact on the world beyond their service, then we can layer the legacy conversation into that.
Which is, fascinating to me why so many organizations think that once they confirm a bequest with a donor, the donor will be like, solved it, and not give to you ever again. You
No,
just got married.
that's not how that works.
No, and in fact, we've got the data to show their annual giving goes up. They're so much more likely to make a major gift.
Yeah.
For quite a number of people, they get more deeply involved with the organization.
Because I
So,
think of it like an engagement continuum.
mhm.
Right. So I know that there are some more traditional major donor fundraisers who aren't going to like that I say this, but
Mm.
I abhor the term moves management.
Oh, ho, ho.
I abhor it. And
Okay.
and I think if we think about engaging with our donors more like a continuum, where once you're able to have that legacy conversation with them, then that relationship becomes even more intimate, right?
Mhm.
You
Yep.
can lean on them for a lot of things because they're so invested. And those are the donors who are closest in your circle. And if you've got a circle of relationships, they're the ones who are right there. They want to see you succeed. So those are the ones that we can have really deep and meaningful conversations about about our annual plans. And
Yep.
they'll want to continue to be invested in that. So
But one of the things I've been thinking about recently is the type of shop, the relationship they have with donors. What you just described was a hand put together Bentley and an organization that respects that donor relationship. But there's so many organizations that build it like, Ford on the assembly line years and years ago, and they're just churning out that donor, that annual fund kind of, again, risk management. Ask for small risk, small reward, and all they're doing is planting and reaping and planting and reaping, as opposed to building a cathedral and thinking the long game, which is another piece as well in this.
well, and that getting caught up in the tactics of fundraising is a symptom of a broken system. And that broken system can be fixed.
This is hard. This is
You know,
exactly why I refer to people to some of your work and your process, because I do live very much in the tactical. And a lot of people do, because we're in there trying to keep the thing humming. But if the organization, the individual, the community doesn't understand their why do we work this way? Why do we do things this way? What are we all about? It sounds like it's some sort of philosophical thing, but
I
it's
know.
it's like the very spark at the core of the whole deal.
That's why people say, "Oh, Kimberly, I'd refer you if I knew what you did." Nobody knows how to sell this stuff,
Yeah,
honestly. But really, some of those challenges are cultural,
yeah.
and we need to go way upstream
We
to
have better words now. Again, it's, and you've helped some of our peers with this in strategic planning and those board discussions,
Yeah.
having hard conversations. Again, that was a really cool one. You said, call me when you know you would need to have a conversation, but you don't know what the conversation is. And that was a really helpful one, because we were like, we're stuck.
Well,
Everybody wants it to be strategic planning, but we've done that. They want it to be some sort of board learning facilitation, but we've got all the forms and we've got all the things in the system. What we need to do is facilitate a conversation.
but maybe
Hey,
maybe
What's the
that's
problem?
because I'm only cutting you off because I
Mm.
don't want it to sound like the Kimberly sales pitch. So,
Mm.
uh, um, I think that that's because anybody looking at this video can tell I'm really thinking.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, hop over to the YouTube channel, folks, if you really want to be entertained.
Yeah.
Anyway, but uh, it's because they're not excited about the vision. You think about startups, you think about those organizations that were so fired up. They're up and out and working every day and it doesn't even feel like work. So if an organization has gotten into a slump, if it's become too tactical, I would recommend a big step back and asking yourselves, what kind of change do we feel passionate about making in the world?
And
And
some people, their desire scales. I remember visiting a food bank like probably around 7, 8 years after founding, and it wasn't that they had lost the love, but boy, they were a big machine by then. They were trying to get one truck in year 3, and now they had a dozen trucks, right? So it was very hard for them when they reached that operational
Mhm,
scale to
mhm.
go beyond that operational vision.
Yeah, scaling growth is tough
Mm.
because when you scale, it's going to require cutting back in other areas. It's going to require an investment. And that brings us right back to the importance of a legacy program,
Yeah.
because the organizations that are doing really well right now are ones that have a nice, solid, healthy reserve in the bank built on conversations with donors around legacies and bequests.
And it's still unfortunately a lot like a lottery where you don't know which donor it's going to be. When Malcolm Burrows just wrote a great blog post in All About Estates talking about how still 90% of donors aren't disclosing who they are. But the fact is, if it's like the lottery, then you're never going to win if you don't buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to do it. You got to have that, even again, the passive asks in there, but we got to make sure donors know they can do this. So the 1 in 1,000 will. And if you got 20,000 donors, well, that's 20 people.
So I might put you on the spot here, but if there is somebody listening to this conversation and they're like, oh, how do I convince my board that we really do need to make an investment here? Do you have like top 3 arguments for why an organization, like the top 3
Yeah.
reasons why?
You bet. Number one, I know what boards want. They want to make sure the revenue's strong. And the fact is that a planned gift is on average 1,000 times what someone gives you annually. So if you're doing transactional fundraising, dollar for dollar, again, why would you do that with your business? Most board members work in capital acquisition industries. So do capital acquisition, gifts of assets. So it's that diversified revenue stream is number 2. And number 3, and this one feels soft, we gotta say love is a hard resource, and there's a ton of donors who have a lifelong relationship with your organization, and people say, oh my gosh, it's such a big ask. Well, if they've got a lifelong giving relationship with your organization, if you haven't let them know how they can leave that legacy, then you haven't done your due diligence. You haven't done the courtesy to that person to say, you've walked with us your whole life, would you be with us beyond?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my top 3: 2 head, 1 heart.
That was fun. I think we should put people out of their misery now. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day long.
Well, it's my passion, because again, I just despise transactional fundraising for so many different reasons. And yeah, we've got to fight it. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck with just raising dollar for dollar every day. You're running a hot dog stand.
Oh, hey, Paul, guess what? I'm having conversations on Clubhouse about board development.
Good for you.
Yeah. So when you hop in there, you can join us. I think it's Wednesdays or something. It's in the intersection calendar. So
all right, I'll get in there. I'll get in there one day. As I said, I'm notoriously late to all parties.
Oh, well, it's great connecting with you. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thanks for having these great conversations, Kimberly.
Remember, legacy fundraising isn't a conversation about death. It's a conversation about life with your donors and how you can help them extend their values and their hopes and their dreams and their vision for the world well beyond their lifetime. So get in there and build that legacy program. And remember, we would love for you to subscribe, share, comment, get back to us, let us know what you thought, ask any questions, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for spending time here.